listen to some of the Democrats who intend to oppose it, is her alleged role in the destruction of video evidence of acts of torture. Can you speak to that allegation?
Well, at least by the reports that have been circulated in the press, I can't get into any classified information here, but she served as the chief of staff for an individual who had authorized that destruction. So she was in the agency at that time, again, involved in this program. And again, I think that she will need to explain to the Senate Intelligence Committee, personally and directly, what happened at that time, both in terms of the program itself, her role, as well as in the destruction of the videotapes.
Director Brennan, we're awfully happy to have you of counsel around here, and thank you very much for making time to join us by telephone on this busy night. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Good to talk to you.
Former CIA Director John Brennan, who, becoming of counsel to us, joins the likes of Mike McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and an MSNBC international affairs analyst, and retired four-star U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey, decorated combat veteran from the Vietnam War, former battlefield commander in the Persian Gulf, who is now an MSNBC military analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to you. And Ambassador, I'll start with you. Where do you think today's personnel moves leave us or set us up vis-a-vis Russia?
Well, vis-a-vis Russia, I'm not ready to say yet, because you've had a real gap between what the president says and believes about the Russia policy and the rest of the administration. And there's nothing that I've heard from Mr. Pompeo that makes me believe that he's different from where Mattis or HR McMaster are in terms of standing up to the Russians. The problem has always been the president doesn't support his administration's policy towards Russia. This change at the Secretary of State is not going to change that basic fact.
Barry McCaffrey, the Secretary of State designate, spent a little bit of time in your beloved U.S. Army, first in his class, West Point. Not an easy undertaking. Goes on to Harvard Law. Along the way, serves to the rank of captain in the Army. Comes into the House as part of the Tea Party wave, and the rest has become kind of contemporary history. Where do you put his chances at the State Department, with special concentration on his potential dealings with the Russians?
Well, I think the ambassador really put it in the correct context. The problem is going to be the President of the United States, who, for some reason not yet discernible, has ignored an authoritarian, corrupt demagogue who threatens his neighbors, who has eliminated democratic opposition inside the country, and who's causing enormous problems to U.S. national interests in the Middle East and the Ukraine and elsewhere. So, I mean, that's the issue. Now, look, Mike Pompeo is a very capable person. I don't think there's any, he'll have no illusion about what the Russians are up to. The question will become, to what extent can he educate, can he shape the dialogue going forward? And I think he'll do better than Secretary Tillerson, who I think is a very fine man, but for some reason, it's not clear to me, with his background, he still was a disaster as Secretary of the State. So I think this is good news, as is the nominee to replace him in the CIA. She's a professional. This is good news for American national security.
General, what does it say to the wider world that our guy at the head of the State Department wakes up in Africa, flies home, is fired by Twitter, and that this is how we change the cabinet room chairs?
Well, look, you know, there's a body of people in the government at the highest levels that actually trust each other. They've known each other for years. They're experts at their business. The interagency process actually works quite well. And part of it's because the cabinet officials are women and men of dignity and integrity. Boy, that's getting ruined. We've got islands of competence still in the government, but this is no way to shape a team. The president has stepped forward with unilateral push to become the chief diplomat in almost every manner. So watch what happens dealing with the North Koreans. I mean, at the end of the day, North Korea is not going to denuclearize. They're not going to improve human rights. So So what is it that President Trump will give them starting in May that may not be favorable for U.S. national interests?
Ambassador, perhaps you heard me use the facts and figures that Andrea Mitchell had compiled for us just tonight about the hollowing out of the State Department. Perhaps you heard me refer to the new pejorative among some in Washington, career Foreign Service officer. Since you were one, do you have a fear that Pompeo's charge is still going to be find me 30%, like a Washington's birthday white sale, and cut it out of the middle at the State Department? Or do you think that there's something about Mike Pompeo that's going to want to restore its institutional luster?
Hard question, Brian. I hope that we're not just worrying about cutting the budget by 30%. And Secretary Tillerson did not do any, did not win over any of those Foreign Service officers. But here's the problem that he's going to face. On the one hand, he has a much closer relationship to the president. And from what we've been hearing from reporting today on policy issues, they're closer together on issues like Iran and like North Korea. But that may put him at odds with the career Foreign Service people. And so you might have a Secretary of State that's closer to the president on policy, but doesn't actually win over the rest of the building. His first job, though, I just really want to underscore this, is just putting together a team in place. If we just talk about Korea, let's just talk about we do not have an ambassador in South Korea. The top North Korean person just resigned. The Undersecretary for Arms Control and the Assistant Secretary for Arms Control, the people that are usually involved in negotiations about nuclear weapons, those are all unfilled positions. So if he's a real leader there, the first thing he wants to do is just put a team on the field. Diplomacy is a team sport. That should be the first thing that he does once he gets confirmed.
Ambassador General, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. I know it's late at night when we've been, our attention has been pulled in several different directions, but we would not try to have this conversation without both of you. Thank you both very much, General McCaffrey and Ambassador McFaul. Over to the big board, Steve Kornacki, we've been watching you while we've been having our conversation. You've been consulting with your team and looking at your giant laptop. What do you have?
All right, we got some more numbers for you just to kind of further clarify the situation. Again, Conor Lamb leads by 570.